Good afternoon, everyone. So, to start off today's event, I would request our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Dr. Ajit Ranade, and today's invited guest speaker, Professor Shruti Tambe, to come to dais. Today, we have gathered here to celebrate International Women's Day. This day is a special occasion to recognize and appreciate the contributions of women to society and to reflect on the progress that has been made towards gender equality. The theme for this year's International Women's Day is Digital Innovation and Technology for Gender Equality. The gender digital divide prevents women from fully reaping the benefits of the digital transition. Now, I would request our Vice Chancellor, Dr. Ajit Ranade, to address us on the occasion of International Women's Day.
Good afternoon, everybody. And, thank you, first of all, to the IQAC cell led by Dr. Sangeeta Shroff and Dr. Rath for taking this initiative on today's lecture and observance of the day. Thank you, Madhurima, for the introduction. The Women's Day is celebrated on March 8th every year, as per the calendar, English calendar. And I was curious to know what is the reason. I'm sure you can Google this, but it's interesting why March 8th. I was wondering if it is anybody's birthday, special birthday. Does anybody know without Googling? How about you? So I was also curious that why March 8th. So it turns out that there is no one theory about why March 8th. It has been officially observed as the International Women's Day. Of course, the other big debate that we want to get into is why one day has to be designated Women's Day. Why not every day? But it has been March 8th has been observed as International Women's Day for almost 50 years. So it started in 1975. I think maybe it's United Nations. I don't know. It's declared by the United Nations since 1975. So it's almost 50 years, 48 years. So that is one reason. But again, that doesn't answer the question why United Nations picked March 8 as the day. So there are multiple theories. But it looks like it is related to the agitation and movement of women for equal participation in the workforce or in the economy. And that goes back to 1908, I think, or 1900s. In 1908, there was a celebration or sort of demonstration in New York City where thousands of women marched for better working conditions. So some people say actually it's not just 1908, it goes back to 1857 when the women's movement for equal sort of equal treatment or at least fair treatment. So essentially this March 8, and there is one mention that there was a strike by garment workers in New York City, so textile workers. So there is that, and of course, as you know, this is my favorite example that women did not get right to vote, what they call adult suffrage, till I think 1920s. So America became independent in 1776, and the voting is sort of supposed to be the original modern day democracy, but democratic right, simple right to vote, did not come for another 125 or 140 years to women. And whereas India, by comparison, gave right to each man or woman, rich or poor, Hindu or Muslim, from day one. So we became independent, and from day one, there is actually, as far as I know, no other country which has given the right to vote to every adult from day one. America's example is such that from 1776 to 1922 or 1925, women did not have a right to vote. Black people did not get a right to vote in the 1960s. In fact, even in the earlier days, you could vote only if you had some wealth. So only wealthy white male Americans were allowed to vote. So progressively, the voting rights were extended until we got universal voting rights or universal adult franchise, which we take as given. So that's an interesting thing that an important contributor to universal adult franchise was the women's suffrage movement in America, which is 1922, and again around the same time when this women's movement happened. So I think it's important that even though it is symbolic, I know that Professor Tambe will also probably agree that March 8th को at least एक बार तो हम लोग we all remind ourselves कि ये बहुत struggle करके हम यहाँ पे पहुँचे हैं. But today's India is a little bit there's a big concern because only 1 in 5 working age women in India gets paid for doing work. That means barely 20% of adult women between the ages of 18 and 60 actually are doing work and getting paid for it. Of course, every woman is involved in work, but only 20% and maybe it is 18%. So there is some debate about the exact percentage. And this number was not 18 or 20%. Just 15 years ago, this number was 32%. So it's actually declined by 10 percentage points in the last 15, 20 years, during which time India's population has increased. The population of women has increased. But as a percentage, this has come down. Of course, we had a big talk by Professor Shruti Deshpande about a month ago, which talked about this issue. And it was very interesting and very enlightening, well attended. So but currently this is a matter of great concern and debate in India. Well, first of all, some people want to say that these numbers are not correct, data is not right. But I think by and large there is consensus that this has been declining. And a little bit embarrassing fact is that among G20, and this year India is the president of G20, among all the G20 countries, including Saudi Arabia, India's workforce participation of women is the lowest. So this is not something that we are proud of. But anyway, I'm very happy to welcome Professor Shruti Tambe. One more little tidbit, my favorite tidbit, is that 8th of March is also the birthday of a very, very celebrated and famous feminist, Indian, male, poet. Madam, this is a group of very bright women. They're one of India's foremost poets, lyricists, and who. Wait a minute. He was born in Punjab. Sorry, not Gulzar. He is no more. Gulzar is alive. Yes, Sahil Ludhianvi. तो औरत ने जन्म दिया मर्दों को मर्दों ने उसे पैदा किया. You know that famous song. Of course, it's a very, very sad and rather moving song. But I'm very happy that actually, so I like to think that Women's Day is celebrated on March 8th because it is Sahil's birthday. Sahil Ludhianvi was of course not, that is the name he gave himself. Sahil Ludhianvi means born in Ludhiana. Man from Ludhiana, but his name was, kya naam tha uska? Something Harzai Khan. Anyway. So very happy to welcome Professor Shruti Tambe as the guest speaker for today. As you know, she is the head of the Department of Sociology at Pune University, Savitribai Phule Pune University. But more importantly for us, we are very proud that she's also a member of the Vision Committee for Gokhale Institute, Vision and Roadmap Committee, of Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics. And today she will speak on work, women, and world of labor. So it's related to what I told you, workforce participation of women, which aligns with the research interests in social movements, in labor, social policy, qualitative social research, and social theory. She is very active, of course, as a researcher, academic, and I think also pretty much on social media, I'm told. One of her recent publications is Low Wage in High Tech and Ethnography in Service Workers in Global India. She has been an active member of the International Sociological Association since 2000, so last 23 years, and serving as the editor of the newsletter and also as a board member. At the regional association, she has served as a member of the managing committee of the Marathi Samaj Shastra Parishad, Social Science Parishad, and she has also served as the editor for Marathi Samaj Shastra Shodhan Patrika, research newsletter, I guess, for 3 years. And she's been involved in several collaborative international projects, including sponsored by the Social Science and Humanities Research Council in Canada and the Toyota Foundation in Japan. So, of course, this is a very brief resume, but I'm very delighted and would like to welcome Professor Shruti Tambe. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ajit Ranade, for your insights and hope your wisdom will inspire and enlighten us. Now, I will request Dr. Ajit Ranade to facilitate our guest speaker, Professor Shruti Tambe. So, without wasting much of your time, I would request our guest speaker to deliver a lecture on work, women, and world of labor. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. I hope I'm audible. Honorable Vice Chancellor, the Registrar, the IQAC Chief, Professor Sangeeta Shroff, and all other faculty members, very senior professors, Professor Emeritus also, Professor Dhananjali Sakhe is around, and all my young colleagues. And I hope there are members of the non-teaching staff as well here. In fact, I wanted to make this slightly more of semi-academic kind of presentation because the day is, of course, to remember and commemorate the struggles of working class women across the world. So, in fact, from today morning, I have been participating in some programs, and everywhere I'm trying to remind it's not a day to celebrate, it's a day to commemorate, and there's a difference between the two. Because we are talking also about work, women's labor, various worlds of women's labor. And I must remind you that from last 15 days, the notifications on our smartphones are there for PNG Maha Utsav to celebrate International Women's Day, including the new designs of Mangal Sutra, of course, that you must choose from. Then you also have hotels advertising mega breakfast today morning, for today morning. I did get notifications. I'm sure you all did get. Then big salons are advertising gala offers on different beauty packages so that you have the special glow on your special day. I wish I could bring those images for the PPT if at all. But I really wanted to make it a more semi-academic kind of presentation. And I agree with Dr. Ranade. It's like one day in a year, you say thank you, yes ma'am, and all the pageants and photographs and shoots and everything, and bites, of course, these days. And then the world comes back to its normal. So I'm going to start by giving you some anecdotes of women's worlds of labor. And later on, I'll comment on what, therefore, we call as work per se. And of course, I'm aware that I'm amongst economists. So I'm not going to play purposely with figures and statistics and data at all. Because it's something beyond that that I would like to bring forth as a sociology student. So the first anecdote that I would like to give you is Times of India a few years ago gives on the first page a photo feature with our Honorable Member of Parliament, Advocate Vandana Chavan, with an apron in her pantry, in her kitchen. And the caption reads, the MP of Pune cooks her special breakfast for the family to mark the International Women's Day. It just kept me wondering, what exactly in the public sphere are we talking about? The Member of Parliament, of course she eats, just like you and me every day. But why do we have to portray her as someone who cooks the special breakfast for her family in those many words to mark 8th March? Second anecdote I would give you, and again I would quote another Member of Parliament from our own district, Supriya Sule, who is not just a parliamentarian but a Sansad Ratna, if you remember, who a few times has won that award for her consistency in raising questions, being a very studious parliamentarian, making her speeches with a lot of research, etc. That's what Sansad Ratna means. And she was sharing with us in one of the programs that whatever it is, you have made a speech in the parliament, putting your heart and soul about an issue that really hurts you. And you are making some demands on the floor to make changes that are long-lasting for your country. And you come out and in the lobby, most of the people will tell you, ma'am, you look fabulous in a yellow sari. This is your color. And no compliment about what you spoke. And she said, you can only imagine the amount of hurt that a woman member of parliament feels at those compliments at that time. You never want compliments for your looks there. You want to be known for your research, your commitment, your oratory probably, your skills to prove your point and to make some long-lasting changes, but you are still looked at as a gendered, as a female body, as a female self, and how that hurts. The third one I would share, which is about me, sharing the dais with many eminent people in a major program. government-sponsored program with many dignitaries. And somehow the program started very late, and I'm tending to look at my watch, and my turn was supposed to be at something like 11:10, and it's already 12:20, and two speakers before me are yet to go. And I'm just wondering when this would really end, etc. And the person besides me, who's a class one officer, of course, again, unwitting, without thinking much, says, "Ma'am, I'm sure you are in a hurry. You will have to go home and do a lot of things." It's a Sunday morning, by the way. And he says, "I don't mind you taking my turn because kids must be waiting and you have to attend to kitchen and other duties. It's a Sunday afternoon after all." And this is 2020. I'm not talking about 1850s of, Mahatma Jyotiba Phule and Savitribai. So women's world of labor are so many, intertwined, entangled, and yet unaccounted for, unacknowledged, and if at all they are acknowledged, like they were with me, in a very wrong manner. So women's contributions, may it be to GDP, may it be to the country's overall economy, may it be to the making of society. I'm going away from the calculation-based indices of other things like GDP does that. Making of home, making of relations, making of societies, at all levels you will find that she is just taken for granted and not acknowledged. You must be aware, and again, you're all more expert in this field than me, but let me just flag it. In NSSO, it seems that there is a demand now that the breastfeeding mothers, their time spent in breastfeeding should be calculated is the demand. Because through that activity, they are making future India possible, future nations possible. So is that time to be calculated or not as a contribution by women or not? And that reminds me, yesterday, our own member of Legislative Assembly, I guess, yesterday an MLA cried in Mumbai. And that was the news item. I'm sure many of you must have seen it. Did you see it yesterday? She has a 5-month-old baby, and she had written to the secretariat to provide her Hirkani Kaksha, as they call it in Maharashtra, for breastfeeding. And she had demanded it some months ago in the Nagpur assembly session as well. So this time she brought her baby. The baby was ill with fever. And she went to the Hirkani Kaksha because the officer showed her. And she cried after reaching there. It was all dusty. There was no chair. There was no gadda. There was no clean space to sit. There was no water. There was no access to toilet. And she said, "What do you expect me to do? Can I keep my child here with the granny and go to the session and come back?" Of course, I can't. So women's lives are mostly taken for granted. Their contributions are mostly taken for granted. And that's what comes to us again and again and again in multiple ways. Today morning, I was part of a big celebration by Pune Mahanagar Palika Safai Karmachari Sangatna with 16,000 members. And this Sangatna is more than 100 years old. And they were celebrating today, 8th March, in Balgandharva Rangamandir. And before coming here, I attended their function and then I came here. And I was talking to them. In fact, I've been talking to them for many years now. And I was told that usually a Safai Karmachari ordinarily goes for work at 4:45. Around 6, the work starts, which is mostly cleaning of the streets first, and then picking up the garbage and throwing it in certain designated places, then helping the garbage to be put on the dumpers, and so on and so forth. And today they were telling me that Pune Mahanagar Palika Safai Karmachari Sangatna is the only Sangatna which got half-day leave paid leave granted for 8th March programs. Because they have argued with the corporation commissioner that if women are participating as workers in Pune Municipal Corporation, they must understand what is the meaning of being a worker, what are the laws for them, and how to really make those laws workable in their own lives. I was also touched by one of their demands, and I'm happy that we contributed to the making of the whole proof for it, which was that Pune Mahanagarpalika permanent workers are demanding at least half of the facilities that are promised to them as permanent workers to the temporary workers in each ward. So, कंत्राटी सफाई कामगाराला परमनंट कामगाराच्या सुविधा मिळाल्या पाहिजे याच्यासाठी फाईट देणारी एक संघटना पुण्यामध्ये आहे. And they themselves asked us to conduct a survey, ward-wise survey, comparing the permanent workers and the contract workers, compare their pay, their facilities, the amenities available, all the rights, labor rights that are available, and at least at Pune level, they are wedded to extend the same rights to the Kantrati Karmachari board-wise also. And I'm very proud of this. But let's go back slightly to 1990s. And I still remember being present in Tata Institute of Social Sciences. There was a workshop conducted by the Women's Studies Center, then headed by Dr. Chaya Datar. And at that time, just before the census was to take place in 1991, this was early 1990, and they had started debating. Maitrai Krishnaraj, another feminist economist from SNDT, was also involved in the big exercise. And the doyens of women's studies, like you all know, all the senior strong women scholars like Neera Desai was involved. Of course, there were many other people like Veena Majumdar. So it was a nationwide discussion how the questions on birth are framed in Census of India and how those wrongly worded questions are leading us to get wrong figures, what Dr. Damade was alluding to just before when we spoke. So the questions were like, how much do you get at the end of the day after work? But I don't get paid if I'm working with my husband. And here in Mangalwarpet, in the early 1990s, I remember I was visiting Mangalwarpet Jhopadpatti for a survey. And I visited a small hut and I could see in a bamboo basket, there were many shoe soles kept and ladies' chappal soles kept with all the resin pasted and some of the decorative items pasted on the ladies' chappals. And the lady was doing only this part of pasting the resin at home. So there were soles, there were these cut decorative pieces that were to be pasted. And she was just putting the jodas in a bamboo basket. And when I just pointed at it, she was literally trying to hide it. And she was saying, no, मैं घर का सब अच्छा देखती हूँ. She felt as if whatever I'm asking is making an allegation that she's not a good housekeeper. She's not a good mahila. She's not a good spree looking after her house. So the whole attitude was that, of course, I am a mahila. I am a respectable woman who looks after children, cooks properly, cleans properly. This is what I do when I get free time. But looking at the numbers of pairs that she had made in the last few hours, one could see that it was definitely an economic activity that she was involved in. But women themselves never ever, we know even today, they don't really count their own contribution as labor or as work, and this problem still continues. I would also give you another example early on again. We were in a tribal hamlet, and the moment we entered and we were about to start our work, research work, we were talking to the sarpanch, the headmaster, etc., and then kind of, doing the sampling process first and so on. And we found on a bullock cart a young girl, 9-year-old, with these huge, in those days there used to be these tin barrels. Remember drums, we used to call them, panache drum. And she was going in a bullock cart all alone, and water was filled. So she was going up and down the stream getting the water. Definitely someone was already there helping her. And she used to get the cart in the village and go back and fill it again. And we were, Government of India project. So obviously we were surveying girl children in the age group of 7 to 18. And so we were there asking very naively, do you go to school? And she said, yes. Why do you like a very smart girl with twinkling eyes, very young, 8, 9 years, smart girl. Why do you like the school? And just 3 words, she gives the reply in. And even today, I'm still struggling to understand all the shades of meaning in that. And she said, why do you like the school? And the answers that we were getting in other schools, all the bright girls, the pet of teachers were, Deshachi Seva Karache. I want to become the doctor. I'll make my country proud. All kinds of those answers. And this youngster says, Unna I love it. Why do you like the school? That's the only place which gives me some shade and which gives me some respite to sit back and sit quietly at leisure. Just imagine. And these are the many shades of women's work and their uncalculated, unacknowledged labor that we talk about. Think about all the women who have been in the gray area of surrogacy. And we know that the horrific cases and the impacts, Gujarat, for example, the data was published in Indian Express, we remember. And after that, the law has finally come because women from very poor families were cheated, were deceived. They really didn't know the implications of certain kinds of treatments. And they were the mothers of 2 children, 3 children, up to 4, up to 5 children, just for 55,000 rupees per pregnancy. And there were some, of course, permanent impacts on their bodies. I'm not even talking about their minds and their souls. But if at all you consider that also as word, then we know that in India, there are so many grey worlds of labor as well that don't come to light at all. I can also cite a research study done by one of my young friends who finished her doctoral work very recently from Tata Institute of Social Sciences. And she was looking at the Bangladeshi women working near Mumbai. And the stories that she had about their locked worlds, their caged existence literally, in and around Mumbai, in and around Konkan, in and around West Bengal, are really horrific. The issues of citizen, not citizen, legitimate, illegitimate, legal, illegal crossing of boundary are all valid. But yet the question remains whether their work and labor is bringing in wealth to transnational companies like McDonald's or not. And the answer is yes. They are contributing to wealth making, and yet their whole existence is criminalized completely and beyond the purview of law or even social recognition. Law is one thing, economic rewards is another, and the third is social recognition. And on all three counts, unfortunately, we find that they are in the world of darkness. So that's another area. Next, I would like to flag the new service industry participation. And if there was a mention that we published our book in 2019, it was brought out by Oxford University Press, Low Wage in High Tech. And we were looking at auxiliary workers in Pune city working with IT industry who are not acknowledged. So आम्ही अभ्यास केला त्या drivers आहेत काही cab drivers of IT industry, security guard women, and of course the housekeeping staff in large numbers, which is a feminine job, which is considered to be a feminine job, pantry and cleaning of toilets and so on and so forth. And in all of those, we found that the intertwining of caste, class, and gender was affecting them in a classic intersectional way on all negative counts. So women who were typically deserted or divorced or widowed were given jobs, and I'm talking about Pune city IT parks. So of course the data is there, but with ethical concerns, we have changed the names in the book, obviously. And there were those ethical consent forms filled up, and there were discussions around those in detail with all our respondents. But I can tell you that whenever we went to interview, the supervisors never left us alone. Never ever we were left alone with the housekeeping staff or the security guard women. And most of them have faced even caste-based violence in various forms. For example, in an IT park, if a security guard woman is checking the handbags of IT engineer women, they have come across cases where they were told, they were trashed, they were pushed aside, and they were told तेरी जो जात है उसकी लिमिट में रहे. You're a security guard, remain in that. So the feudal values that really still, even today, control our mindsets. The person on the dais telling me you have to go home and cook and be prepared for your family, you better leave early. Not even asking me what I feel about it, but just kind of telling me, you better go home. Your kids must be waiting for you, and that's your job. Or someone who is telling the security guard woman officer that she better remain in her own confines of caste and payment, which is the class structure. You don't know we have two BMWs and we were in the US till last month. You can't talk to us like this. You can't check my wife's bag. That was another thing in a specific case. So the feudal values are still controlling the Indian mindset, and I feel whatever it may take. Let me come to towards the second part of my presentation now, and therefore I would just end by saying I argue that there are four components of the framework that I at least consider to be important whenever you're looking at women's reality in India, and especially so if you're talking about the worlds of labor. So the first one is, of course, the caste system. And the caste system decides our access to many different opportunities and the way in which, even if we get access, whether we can actualize the opportunities, use them, and better our prospects in terms of mobility in the long run. So caste system determines at what age we must get married, what courses we can do or cannot do, who should be our partner, and what should be the circuit of selection from where the selection of marriage has to happen, how inevitable marriage is, that is also very closely connected with our caste and class status, so both together. And caste also defines, for example, this is a famous example given by one of the older generation writers from Maharashtra, and someone who came from the democratic socialist tradition of Samajwadi circuit of Maharashtra, Vinayak Rao Gokhale, who used to be in Pune itself. So Vinayak Rao used to always tell me when I was a student like you, and I think Jayanti remembers still, we used to attend these lectures by Professor G.P. Sardar, Pamba Sardar, or Sulbha Brahme, or Kumud Pawde, or other people also around. Ali Pandit used to come down from Mumbai many times, and we used to go listen to these people and learn a lot. So Vinayak Rao used to always say there's a catch when you talk about marriage is inevitable for women. Don't say it is the standard kind of diktat. And we were very confused. Why? And then he used to always give two examples. He said marriage for a Maratha girl who says, I don't want to get married at all in my life, is not a choice to her at all. That's a misnomer. A Maratha girl and no marriage? Impossible. And for a Kolhati girl who's a dancer in Tamasha, a Kalavanta girl, Kalavanti as she is called in the traditional Maharashtrian sense of the term, if she says, I really want to get married, that is a misnomer too. Because caste defines all your life chances, including your marriage or no marriage, education or no education, etc. The second aspect of the framework, I told you four elements I argue. And the second one is, of course, patriarchy. And remember, caste and patriarchy collude in India in very complex ways. They work together, but in very interesting ways. It's not always that it goes in a very, the relationship is not very simple. It's a complex relationship. So patriarchy takes different forms and it works with caste system at different junctures in different ways. But patriarchy is not just in relationships. It's about property. It's about decision making. It's about controlling sexuality, controlling desires, controlling mobility, and controlling even your freedoms of various kinds, including what to speak, when to speak, where to speak, etc. And all of these together also decide, therefore, women's relationship with work and labor, and what they would do or they would not do eventually. Third element in this framework is, of course, today's neoliberal globalization, which is profit-oriented, which is beyond borders, and which is based on a certain idea of consumerism. So women's bodies and women's minds, on the one hand, are liberated in this neoliberal globalization, and on the other hand, you will find they are put in another prison of a very consumerist self, which is isolated from communities, which is more of a very lonely self also. And that's why those, all the notifications of glow on your face on the special day and all the shopping, attractive offers for today from all the mega stores you're getting for last 15 days. So it's a consumer self, it is a lonely self, it is a self that is not really allowed to look at self-actualization in its true sense of the term. But it's a commercialized, commodified self and body. And that's what globalization gives you. Globalization also gives you opportunities. I'm not denying that. It's like a double-edged sword. So of course, there are both the things. There are positive things with globalization and there are negative things with globalization. But you will, if you take a consorted view, I would remind you what Dr. Ranade was telling you about workforce participation, about some basic service access of women also in India. And you will find the paradox of this package called globalization. There is a paradox hidden within it. And sometimes you see the positive more and sometimes you see the negative more. So both are true. And we have to really, in a very, very analytical fashion, we have to assess it. And last but not the least, I argue, it's the feudal values, especially for a country like India, that define the nature of any issue relating to women. For example, just now in the morning, I had gone to agriculture college to speak to the students. And one of the students came afterwards behind me, a male student, saying that I want to ask you something. And sure enough, I knew he had to say that you're wrong in so many ways. And I always welcome that, especially about women's issues. So I said, what happened? He said, yesterday the girls were not allowed to even come out of their hostels. हम लड़के इतने भी निकम्मे नहीं हैं कि होली के दिन कुछ अत्याचार करेंगे, लेकिन कॉलेज ने ऐसा सोचा ही क्यों कि हम अत्याचारी निकम्मे हैं और लड़कियों को बाहर तक नहीं आने दिया. Don't you think the college has to change itself? If we mix with each other more, if we talk more, if we know more about each other, maybe we will become better men and we will become better women. Point well taken. What he says is correct. But at the same time, we all know that Holi comes and all of us, now in Pune, the situation is very different. But I come from a Mofussil background, a non-metropolitan background, and I can tell you that at least 4 days in advance, there was a word of caution given to us. And the word of caution was not always wrong. And you know that Holi is associated with so much of sexual molestation, so-called liberty taken at the pretext of Holi, and there are so many things without consent that tend to happen around that time. So patriarchy operates with feudalism and with capitalism, and the package becomes very, very complicated. And therefore, I would just comment here on one field of work and labor, that is the performative labor. And we all know that in service industry, now performative labor and emotional labor, that sector is growing so much. The salons, the massage parlors, the beauty industry of all kinds, and also the gyms and the wellness clinics, and all kinds of related services that are called emotional labor. Even hospitality industry, including the job of an air hostess, for example, where your labor is more of performative labor and more of emotional labor. And in a country like India, where already caste, patriarchy, feudalism, and globalization are together, controlling your behavior and the behavior of others, I think the sector of performative labor and emotional labor becomes very tricky. So you have to perform, and yet with the kind of feudal patriarchal values, you're continuously under this scanner. A hotel industry employee was telling us 2 years ago, this was, that some foreigners were to come and the whole female staff members were asked to come in a 9-yard sari and the typical Maharashtrian hairdo, etc. And in the month of May, they were made to stand for 2.5 hours. The flight was delayed, but they were not allowed to go inside the shade. They were standing with the tilak and the garlands and so on. And the moment you slouch, there are actually pay cuts because the supervisors count how many times you slouched during the given duty hour of welcoming the guest at a particular point in a hotel. And you can imagine what does that really mean for performative labor and emotional labor, where all this cannot be really quantified in terms of what emotional exhaustion does it lead to give this kind of performative labor and emotional labor. I would now very briefly turn to, can I just get my cell phone, please? The last part, because Dr. Rath had requested me to comment on it. UN's this year's focus is on digital, and I would just very briefly talk about it. The biggest thing about digital world is still racism and exclusion are marked in the digital world. And this is now acknowledged by the UN as well. I always say that the Japanese and the Indians are short. So people like me who are short find it so difficult in a car to put that seat belt and to drive. If there are so many lakhs of women riding four-wheelers, why can't Indian car companies at least tweak the design slightly for our heights, for our body frames, and make it more comfortable for us? And digital UN mandate has some 4 to 5 sections. The first is, of course, closing all gaps in digital access and skills. And again, I will not give you the data, it's all there on the website. But it's really, really remarkable that there is bandwidth, there is class status, but the smartphone is not used by women in the family. Who gets the smartphone if the smartphone is being bought? And again, there you will find the interplay of feudalism, patriarchy, and caste would be really determining it. Support women and girls in STEM. And I have some other thoughts, of course, coming from social sciences. I think STEM will be more meaningful if we had more of interdisciplinary learnings. Otherwise, we would not find so many engineer husbands involved in domestic violence at this rate. We need humanities and social sciences and philosophy and knowledge of gender studies more, in fact, alongside STEM. So I would just slightly tweak this and say, support women and girls in STEM and support men and boys to get into humanities and social sciences. They need to acquire those skills to be more human. They need to learn how to be sensitive more to the needs of others and to be more inclusive. Third, create tech that meets the needs of women and girls. And I really agree that a large amount of innovation is needed to imagine how to track violence, to track inequities, to track harassments and control all the kinds of wrongdoings. What kind of technology could we really come up with? And obviously for innovation and new technologies, there's a vast scope. And we must really accept this third mandate of UN. Fourth one, and the last one is address technology facilitated gender-based violence. And I think Indians know it much better. I have seen in my own department also these phishing, games working and people being duped in no time really. And then profiles of girls on Facebook being played with and false identities being created. And we know with chatbots and with the new technologies now, it's even the gray kind of world, and how to control it is going to be a challenge. So I would just stop by saying that today what I'm going to really remind ourselves is, let me say it again, it's a day to commemorate struggles and to make world better, more equitable, then just say that we will celebrate it. And as Dr. Nagade was reminding us, I would also say that in Germany in 1845 also there was a big struggle. And then, of course, 1908, New York, and not just a big demonstration, but women were killed also, but there was firing. We know suffragettes, women have died in England also. There was witch hunting of various kinds, and even today in India, in the Northeast and in Odisha, there were, last year itself, there were many research papers on this. Witch hunting is a big ploy to kill women who are articulate women, demanding land rights, demanding democratic rights, who are elected in the villages. They are usually blamed as witches, and then slowly within 6 months to 8 months, there's mob lynching or there's just burning alive, still happening in our own country. So in various forms, this really keeps happening. And the struggles are too many. And I think the efforts are really far less. As I reminded you, I would like to give you two, three more anecdotes or examples really. That what is our sensitivity? We talked about Nirbhaya so much, but what happened after that? And again, giving you figures, if you would like them to hear, every 17th minute there is a rape still in India. And usually people ask me, what about the West? The West is equally patriarchal, we all know. The difference is that if there is a crime, the possibility of someone getting caught, for the criminal getting caught, is far more in the Western countries than in India. Because the issue of feudalism, mera ladka hai, we haven't been able to solve. And that's the problem. If you remember the famous UP case of Unnao, he was a sitting MLA who raped a girl, and the girl's whole family was killed in broad daylight. Sometimes a truck was run over them, sometimes a jeep was run over them, and still the girl kept on fighting for years. And finally, if you remember, in broad daylight, she was burnt alive, and she was the only witness remaining, still fighting, still pursuing the case against that MLA. And she had to die in broad daylight, and nothing has happened after that. So I think what we have to remember is really not to give up our sensitivity just because the numbers are too many. But any society, and especially a democratic society, remains what it is because of a very vibrant civil society. And we, as teachers and researchers, are part of the civil society. So, unless we research and we comment on even categories like who's a worker, what is work, what is labor, how do you really define those things in the changing scenario? And without getting caught into the taken for granted assumptions about work and labor, I don't think we can bring out the inconsistencies in the data or the hidden reasons behind why data is not getting caught and reported. And neither can we really give enough explanations and evidence to do away with these kinds of inequalities and inequities in India. I think in India now, the situation is even more grim, we know, because the equity issue is really, really something tricky for us. Because after the LPG, we really have some very, very, things to boast for, some very good performance on some indicators. But if you find the equity level, then there are many issues regarding equity. And let's remind ourselves, today, there's this year's UN 8 March 2023 slogan is, and if you may, you might find it childish, but I would request you to do it with me. Today's slogan is embrace equity. And they just want all of us to do this, to mark it. Embrace equity, and today's symbol is this. So if you open UN Women, you will find images of many different men and women with this. They have filmed themselves and put it up on the UN as a commitment to bring in equity. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Professor Tambe, for insightful and thought-provoking lecture and shedding light on challenges and opportunities faced by women in the world of work. Now, I would request Professor Savitribai Shaw to offer the vote of thanks for today's event.
Good evening, and respected Vice Chancellor, Registrar, all the lady colleagues, the gentlemen, and everybody present here. Dr. Shruti Tambe gave us a very enlightening talk, and so many, many anecdotes to say that still today we have so many obstacles which women are facing, and there is still a middle mindset. So we have a long road ahead. So, I mean, it's really quite disturbing, so many issues which women have to face. But of course, there are hopefully some positives as well. Like I read a lot about Sudha Murthy and how she's written that how she had to fight to become take admission to an engineering college. And what touched me most is she wrote that there was no toilet for women because she was the only lady. So imagine her morning Tuesday going for class and literally there's no toilet, or if she was absent and sick, she couldn't borrow notes from anybody because you couldn't talk to a man. But of course, today in Pune, I mean not in Pune, in India, we have so many engineering colleges and so many are women, 20-30%. So that's hopefully the positive side. And we are hearing, yesterday I received my friend at the airport and she said there was some women pilot lot. So we hope that, the road ahead is going to be more bright and women come up in all spheres of life, even challenging ones like mechanical engineering and pilots and Navy. A lot of obstacles to face, but we hope that we are moving in the right direction. So thank you so much, Dr. Shruti. Really very interesting lecture, and I thank the IQAC cell, the social team, and everybody, each and every person for contributing for the photography session. And thank the Gokhale Institute for giving a wonderful gift to every woman. A rose, and so really very thoughtful of the authorities of Gokhale Institute. It's certainly been a very enlightening day for us, a very pleasant day. I can see a smile in the face of all the women. So that's very heartening. Thank you so much. Thank you.